tell me about Randy. What it was like when you were working with Randy.
Well, I knew Randy on two bases, two levels. You know, I knew him professionally where he was a singer, a singing cowboy. That was the era of the singing cowboy. You know, was as Gene Autry and Roy Rogers were going out, sort of, that was popular. And now we had a radio show that predated T-Bar V on WHS radio. And the guy didn't cut it. The management didn't. They tried to bring him over into the TV version of the radio, Circle Star Ranch, I think it was called. And so they devised T-Bar V. And Randy was working for another radio station at that time. And they brought him over, and he was a good fit because he had a compatible personality. He was pleasant to be around, not only for kids, but it was a nice company. He was a nice fellow. And his brother, his older brother, I forget his name, was a pretty big country music star in a big Chicago station. So it was kind of a heritage. And Randy fit in right well. And then Tom Brooks, who was a fellow radio announcer. That's when we had a staff of radio announcers who then doubled over on TV. He was a very playful guy. Tom was very antic, like in the same league of his brother Foster. They were clowns, and they would do anything for a laugh. He could take out his teeth with probably the making of his fortune, And he devised this makeup. It was really not a cowboy makeup. It was sort of a clown makeup as Cactus. But he was non-threatening, although a few kids looked at him funny because he had these big globs of white, as you'll see on the film we have. But they got along well, and the kids liked Randy and Cactus, and they became a fixture. Now, that went on for 20 years, and people would make fun of it. Little kids, they would sit on their laps, and sometimes it would be accident. They would wet themselves, or even worse, wet one of the performers who was unfortunate enough to have them on the lap. And so that went very well. It was television, early television at that time, I think between 1950 and 1970. And people would bring their kids down there, and they would all wave at Grandma and so forth.
What, if you know, who came up with the T-Bar V concept?
Well, it started from radio, actually. It was a radio show, so it was really a carryover.
Okay.
And they just added the birthday cake, which was, in most cases, a decorated piece of plywood,
There's probably a lot of adults watching this that are going to be surprised to know that you are the Squire McSneer.
If they remember, yes. I wanted to get, I knew that if I could get on the show, I would get a pickup fee. None of us got much money in those days, or even today for that matter. So I devised a character. I thought there ought to be a little, an evil guy in there, not enough to scare the kids. So I came up with this idea of being the old style, time to the railroad tracks villain, Reed, And my wife had a tall girlfriend who was so tall, and she had a black velvet drape, a cape that stretched down to the ground. And she was taller than I, so that I wore it, I could button it at the neck, and it would completely envelop me. A black, sinister cape.
So the Squire McSneer was your creation?
Yes, yes. I brought it to him. Now, I don't know where the cape is, but I had this beat-up old...
And that's the original?
That's it. You could see it must be 75 years old. And I would wear this, and then I would paint a black mustache. I painted sideburns that curled up in the old-fashioned melodramatic way, and then I made a mustache that curled, kind of like Barry Bingham's, only all black now, and twirled at the end, and I would twirl my mustache and cover my face and give what I thought would be a ghoulish laugh. Well, they liked the idea, and I would do different capers, and they would always catch me. I was saying once, I had a cap pistol in my waistband, and I was going to hold him up, It was just and in my zeal, as I pulled the gun out of my waistband, it flew up over the top of the set. And there was no retrieving it. I mean, it was gone. It was like disappeared. And with this was live television. And I didn't know what to do. And so I said, I don't need a gun. And I stuck my finger out and I said, I'll shoot you with my fingernail. A ridiculous thing. So they captured me there. But those were the pitfalls of live television.
Were you ever involved with Hayloft Hoedown?
No.
Okay.
No, I was there at that time, but I never was on. That was pretty musical. Tiny Thumbnail,
Right.
and Shorty Chesser, and Bernie Smith, a great guitarist and banjo picker. But no, I wasn't on those shows.
What was it? Radio, TV was different then than it is today. Number one, it was live. You also had a lot. It seems to me you had a lot more people in the creative side when you were putting these shows together. Somebody had to devise these skits.
Yes, and everybody would come up with his own ideas, and generally they weren't put in paper. Would put down on paper. You would say, "You stand here, and I'll stand here, and I'll say this, and you'll say that, and we'll see what happens." And that was the great thing, you know. That's my mark of a good performer. Anybody who has got an education can read from a script, some better than others. But to be able to perform without a script and not make a fool of yourself, that's pretty good. And Randy and Cactus, you know, even though they were talking to children, they were kindly, non-threatening people. But they would always go for a laugh, too. If something funny happened with a kid, they would joke, or if they knew the kid's parent or something like that. And then Randy would sing. That's always good. He was, you know, always had his acoustic guitar. Then later years, he would play gigs with his son, Mark. So it was a real heritage.
You all were literally inventing television.
Well, live television was, yeah. I was, at that time, I think I may have been the station weatherman at that time, too. And later on, in the 70s, did a magazine program, some excerpts of which you played on this channel not long ago. That was interesting. But everything came from a radio show that I did, a phone-in show, because there was no script, and that's the best training you can have. If you can do it without making a jackass out of yourself, Reed, without having a copy. A lot of big stars today are prisoners of that, even though they're very good at it. You take away the script and they don't always do as well.
When you think of people like Randy Atcher and Milton Metz, you think of a television that did not insult. It entertained, it made you laugh, it made you think, it occasionally made you cry, but it did not embarrass you or shock you.
Now those were different days. I don't know, there may be a more of an element of meanness today in some hosts. I won't name names, but, and I'm not sure it's always necessary. I don't think everything should be sweetness and light. But talking about Randy, and we are talking about Randy, we would go to lunch after he retired from his program of T-Barvey and Hayloft Hoedown, and a lot of us would go to lunch, and he was just like that, you know, around a lunch table as he was at work, pleasant.
Seems to me like my experience with Randy, he was the same off camera as he was in front. What you saw on the screen was Randy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a rare commodity.
And he married a very lovely person, too. Ironically, he married the widow of a Alan Blankenbaker, a very sweet-natured fellow who had been the art director for TV. He did the sets and so forth. And he died at an early age. And I think Randy's wife had died. And it was a very nice union. And they lived a lovely life together. Very nice people, Betty and Randy Atcher. And he liked to play golf. He read at the Printing House for the Blind and did a good job. As a matter of fact, he surprised a lot of people. He was more than just a singing cowboy. He was a good announcer.
How would you want people to remember your friend Randy?
Oh, I think he made a pleasant impact on many people who are growing up who give them a nice vision of what their youth was. You know, not every day, but, you know, they tuned in and watched. I must tell you one funny thing about it. Randy was doing a TV program once, and he was supposed to be a cowboy. So he was on a horse, and he was supposed to gallop out to the middle of the arena. We were at the fairgrounds or somewhere. Anyway, he jabbed the horse, and the horse reared up on his hind legs. And that was all for Randy. Hopped off, and he ran out to the middle of the field, which I thought was very discreet of him, you know. But, you know, you can't tell horses, you can't say, you know, cue the horse, go over there and expect him to do it. That's what happens with live TV, you know what happens. And you got to make do with what happens a lot of times. But it was a pleasant experience, and I think for a lot of people, you know, David Inman wrote that book on the golden age of television. And there was no ego between Randy and a lot of it. When there are two people in a show, sometimes egos clash. Didn't happen with Randy and Cactus. And later on, Cactus was confined to a nursing home, and he would join us for lunch. He'd lost his wheel, so Randy would pick him up in his wheelchair and make sure that he came to lunch. And Tom was always fun to have. He just couldn't run or to have a lot of muscular move with his legs, but Randy was always made sure he'd pick him up and brought him to lunch. We'd have our laughs, and Ray Shelton would come along, and Dick Sweeney, our program director. It was very nice. Had good memories of that time. It was a different era. Everything's so technological now, you know. You have the satellites for weather. You have acoustical guitars. They're not museum pieces, but, you know, so many things are electronically enhanced these days. He was an uncomplicated guy and pleasant. I think, didn't he and his gang go up on Arthur Godfrey's show once? Yes, I remember. Yeah, they all went up there. That was interesting.
Would I embarrass you to ask you to do the Squire McNair sign off?
I don't know if I could
put a hat on, just remember for my name is ha ha ha.
What was my line?
It's for my name is ha ha.
Yeah, what is it? But I have to have a cape over it.
You'd have the cape on, you felt like it. For my name is
yeah.
ha ha.
I'll get you, or my name ain't. Oh, you made me do it. And I hope my family doesn't see that. They're all my own teeth too, folks, I'll tell you that. I saw you try and imitate that the other day.
But I was raised on that.
Very good.
Man, I was glued to the TV when the Squire was on.
Oh,
yeah, Randy was, I always was telling Barbara and Jeff and I, we're talking at lunch, you know, I think it's real nice of you to come down here. I mean, we're not the biggest station in town, far from it. And you treat us like you treat the place you used to work. And Randy did the same. I think that's the mark of a real decent person.
Thank you very much.
And a real pro.
Well, I'm pleased to speak about a departed fellow. He lived to 83 years, which is longer than some, but not as long as you like some people. But he had an impact, and a very nice one, on the youth, the boyhood and girlhood age of many people who are now grown people in our area.
Yeah, I mean, you know, think of all the adults and grandparents in this town that Randy sat on, well, I'm one of them, sat on Randy's knee, you know, just tens of thousands.
That's right. I've enjoyed it, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Milt.
Right.